Okay. So this was originally a talk that I called Regenerative Therapies Optimized. What separates experts from really well-trained professionals? I'll let you guys think about that. It's not the easiest question in the world, but ultimately it's I think it's not just the technical side of what to do and why, but how, when, where, with whom, and with what goals from a very heart-based approach. If you don't have the technical and the heart together, very hard to embrace a healing pathway. And this will be a talk of the focus of a different talk in the future. And actually the third book that Regenerative Masters will do together as a group. I'll let you guys go back and look at this on your own. That's way too busy for a PowerPoint slide and way too much to discuss, but you guys can go and look at the biases that we have as a group for how we are going to serve humanity. So way back when I started stem cell therapies 15, 16 years ago, I was going from, what do I do? Like, what am I doing with all of these things that I have, platelets and growth factors and stem cells, toward a process of why am I doing this? How am I doing this? When am I doing it? And who am I doing it with? Both the patient and the other providers. And I just wanted to optimize the outcomes and the possibilities for people, or with people. Shouldn't say for, because it's your healing process, not mine. And then recently we've got a 100-point assessment tool. I've been noodling this thing for many, many years, and it's now an 8-segment historical approach to the physiologic, neurologic, emotional, energetic, structural, neuromuscular, cellular, and motivational forces that are affecting people's outcomes with different stages of where they land based on what their score is. And actually the score can be negative 100 to positive 100. And this is it's a tool to help guide us in our initial assessments, as is things like this pyramid that we were going to go over. And I'm just checking to make sure there isn't anybody else that wants to get in. And ultimately, I want this to be something that can be used by the wider medical community on how to assess and help people have the best outcomes they can. So all these are structure. They're all tools that we use to try to help assess and guide a healing process with other people. So this is the structure that I'm going to talk about today, the healing hierarchy. I didn't know that there was a healing hierarchy until about 3 or 4 years into this. I started to notice that people that had significant physiologic problems or neurologic problems were not responding as well to regenerative therapies as others. So what did I do? I did a study on how to optimize cellular function from a dietary standpoint, from a hormone standpoint, from a stop cigarette smoking standpoint, and what these things were all doing to a human being and their process of healing. And over time, pieces and parts just kept coming out, and they seemed to come out one at a time. It was almost like I get good at one layer and I started to incorporate and integrate it in, and then the next layer would start to present itself. It was challenging for me to understand all of these things because my underlying training mostly in medicine is this equals that kind of perspective. Well, this is a fluoroquinolone toxicity, for example. This is a mitochondrial disorder. This is a gut disorder. This is a flora disorder. This is an inflammatory disorder. This is and everybody wants to pin this equals that. And that's both on the part of patients, because everybody's been trained to do that, but it's also on the part of providers, and not insignificantly when those providers have a set of tools that they can use to help somebody that want to apply those tools to that condition, and it becomes defined by those tools rather than the underlying processes that are occurring. And that sometimes serves people really well, and sometimes it doesn't. Being as full and as varied as we can be in our assessment, and then the use of our tools is much more effective for everybody involved. Now, I'm a guy and I'm a sports doc. So when I first made the version of this pyramid, I found that emotion was the most fundamental layer. of healing. I'm definitely not the only or the first individual to come to that conclusion. There are whole treatment paradigms just based on emotion and what it's part of, which is quantum energy. I just pull emotion out because it's the most obvious piece of the quantum aspect of who we are. Now, the people who are on here that already know me know that I do this, so I'm going to get you guys to do a little object lesson for a second. If you've seen Ant-Man, you'll understand the quantum just a little bit better. It should confuse you because even Einstein called this, spooky. What was it? Spooky possibilities at a distance. It's confusing. It does not work like the world we are used to being in. So here's your object lesson. Everybody do this. I can see some of you do this.
Can't see ya.
And then take your finger and go like this. Hopefully your finger stopped. If it didn't, that would be a little weird. Why did you stop? Those of you who have heard me do this, you can't tell the answer. Does it stop because your finger and your forehead are solid? Because they're not. They're 99.99999% free space at the atomic level. So why in the heck do they stop? What is this sense of physical that we have? It's actually the electromagnetic fields around all of your cells are repelling each other. That's what gives us the impression of solidarity, solidness to us, physicality. So what did I just say? Electromagnetic fields creates your sense of physicality. What are electromagnetic fields? That's a type of energy. So you are held together by energetic fields. And in my opinion, it's your consciousness, i.e. spirit, that is organizing and maintaining that physical structure for our learning, our growth, our experience, our enjoyment. Okay, that's a little deep. Not everybody's going to enjoy that discussion, but I tell it to you for two reasons. Number one, if you don't understand how a human being is put together, and you have this belief that we're only physical beings, I don't think you have any chance whatsoever of helping that human being to heal. If you don't know that we are quantum beings with a physical pseudo structure on top of it, very, very hard to really have meaningful transformative effects of what we do. And the other thing that it does is I will look every patient right in the face and say, your hopes, dreams, feelings, your intentions, your desires, all have an energetic equivalent that are going to affect your outcome. And it actually puts us on par with each other for me to tell you, you have the power in how you do this. And I want every patient to believe that. Me placing stem cells exactly where they need to be, how they need to be there, in the combination that they need to be there is not me healing you. It is your body's mechanisms being awakened and alerted to do what they already know how to do. I'm just giving them a little nudge. To my knowledge, I'm the only one who thinks like that in the stem cell community. Okay, so building up now, emotion was level 5. For the fifth thing that I recognized, energy was level 4. And the thing that I realized just before that was physiology. Huge category. Diet, supplements, minerals, hormones, immune system, mitochondrial function, cellular health, neurotransmitters, chronic infections, chronic septic abnormalities via viruses, yeasts, molds, bacteria in your body. This ended up leading to understanding 10 different forms of chronic inflammatory processes that are going on in the body at varying levels all the time. That's a completely separate discussion, because how do you recognize and how do you work on each of those 10 different levels of inflammation, because they all have different sources and they all have different ways of dealing with them. I hate actually the fact that they're all called inflammation, because that's misleading, because your healing mechanism of the body is acute traumatic inflammation. That's via the cyclooxygenase processes, and that's how your tissue actually rebuilds itself. I don't like that being in the same category as something that is destroying your tissue and keeping it from being able to heal. Okay, now the layer that I realized before physiology, neurology. Nobody's ever gotten this question right. How many layers of neurology, at the very least, is there for us to assess and understand? And I say that there's 6. Central nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, nerve roots, nerve plexuses, or plexi, individual peripheral nerves, and superficial sensory nerves. And there can be abnormalities in every single one of those layers, and some of them might be dominant compared to others. I think the reason I started to realize the neurology piece of it was the fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system. You cannot heal if your fight or flight nervous system is in full gear. It's kind of like asking your sprained ankle to heal while you are running away from a tiger. The body's going to laugh at you like, nope, you can't do that. No, thank you. It's not going to put its resources into that. Why is that important? The number one place that we work on together as a team is the upper cervical spine. We're pleasured to have Dr. Dennis Wogan. I'd like him to have a couple of moments to give us his opinion on things from his 50 years of experience. Good friend, amazing provider. That upper cervical spine is geared neurologically to be protected over and above everything else in the body. What does that mean? At least 2 things. Number one, if there's injuries up there, which it's very common because we have a 10-pound bowling ball sitting on 2 little golf tees held together by duct tape, at some point in your life, you're going to likely injure that area, from anywhere from birth to when you fell off the monkey bars or your brother threw you down the steps, or a sports injury or motor vehicle collision. And when you injure that area, just like everywhere else in the body, tendons, ligaments, capsules, fascia, joints are not that great at being able to heal themselves because of low blood supply and low cellularity within the tissues. So instead of going on to a healing process, the body controls it neurologically via the sympathetic nervous system and contorts your body to hold it in such a place that your blood vessels and your nerves, including your brain stem and your spinal cord, are protected. That leads to all kinds of different downstream effects and upstream effects into the brain. And if we don't take care of the upper cervical spine, which is actually the most complex area to do regenerative injections for because of the nerves and blood vessels, then we're actually missing a great deal of the healing that we can do. But that's just one level of the neurologic system at one location. Okay, then we went on. That's where I started. Bones, tendons, ligaments, joints, capsules, fascia, muscles, the structure of the body. That's what I thought I was going to be doing my whole career. I ended up asking 2 very dangerous questions when I was going through my first 6 or 7 years of doing stem cell therapies, and that is, how and why is this happening? The what's easy. A 5th grader can figure out how to look at MRIs and say this one doesn't look like the others. That's not a difficult task. And if we are always biased towards the what, we miss the process of how things happened. And it's akin to being a master gardener and seeing a big weed in your garden and going out and plucking a leaf off every day and hoping the thing dies. I don't want to do that. I want to get down to the roots and figure out how this process happened and how to take care of each of the parts of the process. Okay. Then when those 5 came together, things actually really started to transform. People started to transform. There was very significant changes in these very challenging populations that I had become accustomed to working with. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, fluoroquinolone toxicity, craniocervical instability, rotator cuff believe it or not, extremely complex. Low back degeneration, and then the whole myriad of things that go with these things. That's a bias I didn't share earlier, but by the time one thing is dysfunctioning in the body, you have so many mechanisms to keep moving forward meaningfully through your life. If you're having symptoms, there's a lot happening. Short of somebody coming up and stabbing you with a knife so you have a focal abnormality, all of the processes that had to fail for you to become symptomatic are so interrelated and so varied that a symptomatic human being is by definition complex. Now, becoming non-symptomatic is not a complex process. I can do cortisone injections anywhere in the body, do stem cell therapies, and on average, have nearly complete pain relief for an average of 6 weeks. Makes you an exceptionally popular provider to help somebody become asymptomatic. In the case of cortisone, and of course, it's all deadly to the tissues, and fluoroquinolone toxicity. Nobody should ever have cortisone injections, Ehlers-Danlos either. And the process of helping somebody feel better and healing are two very different processes. So then came timing. When we put all of these very powerful processes all together, how does the timing work out best? And when I say timing, I mean two different things in your life, but also more from a global sort of spiritual standpoint. When is this divinely supposed to help you go on to your next steps? Because if the timing isn't correct, I don't care how good I am with injections. I don't care how good our Ralpher is with energetically and physically helping you have decreased symptoms. I don't care how good our chiropractors are at aligning you. I don't care how good our physical therapists are stabilizing you. I don't care how much deep emotional healing that you do. If you're not doing it at the right time, probably not going to happen. So this is a good time to tell people. It took me a long time to understand when is it the right time for us to invoke this process in people. And it came down to a very simple thing, actually. When I'm describing this process to people, they're going to generally have one of three responses. Either this is way too much and it's way confusing, and I don't know what to do with any of it, or it's going to be, they get kind of an angry response to it. Like the concept of healing at all actually offends them. I had somebody on the fluoroquinolone groups that was very offended by my pyramid, and I didn't want to even consider that possibility that healing existed. And then number three, there's probably a whole lot of blah blah that they're not going to understand that I'm talking about, because I do that to everybody. It's one of my weaknesses. You're probably noticing that right now. But what's happening in their gut, what's happening intuitively to them is, this is the right thing. I am getting excited. I don't care. I quit paying attention to your blah blah a long time ago. I'm just excited about this. Would you shut up so we can get it started? Those are the people that are ready to go through a full spectrum healing process. Okay. So where I believed I wanted to end up going with people then was that whole first 6 steps became the vehicle for them to eventually get down to what I call harmonized healing. That happens in 3 or 4 different ways. You can go from those 6 into a process where very quickly you end up in this harmonized healing pathway. Those are the ones who are raving about me on the internet, and they think that I'm amazing and awesome, and it's incredible, and it's the best thing they've ever done. And it's those ones where we like to beat our chests and say, yeah, we got it right. See? And those are really fun, and it's enjoyable to have those happen, but it's not the ones that always happen. And there's a big gap in between those first 6 and that last one. That gap ended up getting filled in the last year or so, as I started to understand there were deeper processes that people were going through, partly sometimes because we're moving 6 different really big pieces of a human being all in a direction of healing at the same time. In my opinion, the spirit kind of says, okay, cool. Now I can start to address some of these other deeper, darker, more challenging things that are hanging out there that I didn't have an opportunity to get this human being to work on yet. That's their entanglements. What gets them stuck? Why would a person have this really complete process with 8, 9, 10 people working on them in those 6 categories and not go right down to harmonized healing? Two big categories in the entanglement section. There are things, despite our best attempts, there are things in the emotion and quantum energy segments that we're not able to flesh out, or it's just down deeper in a layer where we can't really understand what some of the traumas are that a person carries. And there are a lot of different types. There are a lot of different ways that they manifest in a human being. And they're very powerful. There's an entirely different slide that I made. It's actually more complex than this PowerPoint slide that describes how the process of how these deep traumas end up manifesting in us. And that's the subconscious traumas and emotion. Think of the emotion layer as the immediate emotions that are affecting them, and the subconscious traumas as the deep kind of hidden ones. And then this category started to come out about 6, 7, 8 months ago. Secondary gain, most people, when they see this, or if you look it up on the internet, it's going to talk about things that human beings do in situations to try to manipulate or maneuver to get the best things out of a bad situation that they can. In other words, you were in a car accident and you're going to fake being as decimated by that accident as you can to try to get the biggest settlement that you possibly can. That's a really, really dark way of looking at secondary gain, because secondary gain is a much bigger category than this. And Dr. Dawn Emmett Bishop is with us. I hope she'll talk about this for a few minutes because she's the expert. This is anything physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, energetically, that on a positive side that you get out of your condition. These can be sneaky and they can be very challenging. We identify ourselves oftentimes by the secondary gain issues that we're getting out of our medical condition. And it's a little bit like having to feel like you're, cutting off your left arm to heal from your medical condition. It's very difficult to get past that level. But once you get through the subconscious traumas and secondary gain, they're going to do this. They're going to get all stuck. In this process of those three, I've had people that were doing well while they were here a couple weeks, and when they get hit by one of these secondary gain or subconscious traumas, that the first 6 process-wise brought them to, it's not uncommon for those individuals to flip and say, go from "you're the best doctor in the world" to "I hate you, you hurt me, because we got them into a much deeper process. I didn't appreciate that was happening until about 6, 8 months ago, because partly because that wasn't my process, and having a very complete program like this didn't really come out until about 2 years ago. And so I thought everybody was going to go from those first 6 down to harmonized healing, and everything was going to be rainbows and unicorns. And unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. And dang it, there was no pots of gold at the end of the rainbows. But man, it was an amazing thing to get to see people start to go into their very deep processes on their way to harmonized healing. And this can be really, really, really difficult, where people are hitting things that are lifetime traumas that are very challenging. And then there's still another layer where, based on all of these things that we're doing, you still have agreements and contracts, both in this world and spiritually, that you need to learn and grow past to be able to get to harmonized healing. Again, the more spiritual view of this. That's just the way that I approach it. But mine took me 16 years. I was going through all of these revolutions of all these different layers for 16 years before I started to understand what I was meant to get out of the experience. Okay, so only the regenerative mess, and you can't get to harmonized healing without doing that. You're not going to be allowed to do that. Now there's a layer in between the entanglements and the agreements and harmonized healing that was the final layer that ended up being part of this. And some of you already know this, and some of you might have guessed it, but you can't be all entangled up fighting against what you're trying to get past. That's if you guys are Lord of the Rings fans, remember Frodo trying to struggle through the spider web in the last movie? Or about a Chinese finger trap when you're trying to pull it apart. The more you struggle against it, the tighter it gets. So what do you have to do to get from your entanglements through your contracts to harmonized healing? People hate this concept, by the way. The idea of giving in to allow something to guide you is very counterintuitive to almost all of us. And learning the grace, learning to give yourself that space and allow yourself to be able to stop and take a breather and say, you know what, I'm tired of trying to go around this, above it, and through it. I'm going to let it take me on the journey that I'm meant to take. It's a counterintuitive concept to almost all of us. But yet, perhaps the most important one to allow all this challenge of these 3 layers to go on to these layers. And again, I'll tell you, it's fun. It's much funner in a lot of ways to go from these 6 straight down to harmonized healing. When we skip all of these things, it's not near as much challenge and mucky-muck, but I got to tell you, with fluoroquinolone toxicity, CCI, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, complex PTSD, these are lifetime challenges oftentimes, or they're making you address lifetime challenges. And more commonly than not, going through these, 5 layers on down to harmonized healing, that is some of the most precious, some of the most intimate, and some of the most incredible experience that you can have with another human being. And I tend to like that. It's hard to get to, and it's painful to feel the process with them as you go forward with it. But it is one of the greatest privileges also. Okay, now, this is my way of telling you, this is just structure. This whole thing together is healing. And I don't know how much quantum energy you need versus structure versus surrender and acceptance. I can't tell you, going from the beginning of a process and through a 12 to 18 months after that healing process, you're going to hit different pieces in this equation, highly likely. How bad and how long it's going to take to go through them, and what you're going to have to feel like you're giving up, which is a fallacy. You can never give anything up or lose anything. You're only gaining and becoming. I don't know. I can't predict that. But I can tell you this is something that I learned through the process. And that's where that big yellow stripe has been sitting up there the whole time. You can't fake, force, or mask this process. You're either in a healing process or you're not. And you can't force it from the top down. The structure piece can have positive effects on the other layers, but it can't address those layers for them. In other words, you're going to have better motion and less stress and less local chemical abnormalities when you don't have abnormal tension or compression across a tendon, i.e. better structure. But I'm not going to heal your overall physiology by helping the physiology locally. So these things can't take the place of each other. They can reinforce one another. And think of this like not a glacier, but a iceberg. Think of it like an iceberg. 95% of the iceberg is under the water. You can take the iceberg off, and for a while, it seems like that iceberg no longer exists until it floats to the top again. All of the things that are under the surface are the deep part of the iceberg. And the more of them that we address, identify, and create what I call the placebo vehicle, this stuff all together in one, the more of all this that's going to be identified, the more somebody's going to be able to really intrinsically and fully embrace what true healing is. This is not a popular process, and it's not a popular message. I realize that. It's difficult. It's challenging as a physician to try to put all this and organize all this together, but it's hard as a human being to try to keep track of all this stuff. And that, if anything, that's what we're here for. We're the cheerleaders. We are the educators. We are the supporters for the process. We are the the bumpers on the side of the bowling alley, keeping your ball going down the middle so you're not throwing gutter balls every time you make an attempt and apply your hope or your resources to a process. I want all of those resources to go into meaningful healing. And that needs to start at many deep levels all at the same time. Okay. Here's a previous version of this. And as I told you, this is all one process. It's not 10 or 11, 12 separate processes happen at the same time. Healing is healing. It just has a lot of different facets to it. And it's all in one. And as you approach it, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, you're going to go here, you're going to go all over the place. We're going to try different things. We're going to look at different things. We're going to assess different things. And then Shazam. I love PowerPoints. And it all comes together to, that's what we're looking for. And I don't care how cheesy that sounds. Whole human healing and you being in a joyful existence is what I'm looking for. This is much harder than just being an expert at stem cell injections. But it's what I'm born and called to do. So I can't do it really any other way. Oh, so this is another way of representing this, that these things all coalesce together for tissue deterioration and symptoms. Skip past that one kind of quick to let you know, all of these things have coalesced into 5 major things that we're looking at: emotional, sympathetic, physiologic, upper cervical stability, and epigenetic/genetic function. If we're not looking at these, I don't know of any more baseline reasons why a human being is dysfunctioning other than these ones. And those are all things. That's a small version of everything that we do together with our 10 or so providers. And that's probably enough blah blah, because everyone always has questions about, well, functionally, how does this happen? How do we do this? Because that's complex. And I will tell you at this point, we have the 100-point evaluation. 4 of us that get together and do an evaluation with a patient. That's me, naturopath, PhD psychologist, and dietitian that are all doing an evaluation on somebody. And then 12 different points of assessment that we're all giving a person a score on to help understand whether or not we're going to be looking more towards 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 4 weeks of very organized treatment with preparatory treatment and post-treatment while somebody is going through the process. Putting all these things together is it's challenging, but it's what wakes me up in the middle of the night. It's what gets me up in the morning. When I'm exercising, it's the aha moments that happen in my head. This goes like this and that goes like that, and this, I got to pull this in and that in, and I got to get this person to do this in this situation. It's just how it works after 300 seizures created a great deal of neuroplasticity. There's a love for another human being breathing easier in their own skin, transforming into a greater version of themselves. All right, if that didn't make you all go, oh, to a lurch, I don't know what would. But I'm going to open it up now. You guys can ask as many questions as you want to. Ready, set, go.
Joy is a symptom.
What's that, Dr. Dennis?
Joy is a symptom.
So Dr. Hansen, can you address how, if you are already, so I've been a follower of yours for quite a while and have learned, as you've been learning, and have really worked on a lot of the different aspects that you're talking about. And so I'm curious how you go about working So say someone already has some providers that they're already working with to cover some of these areas. How does that work with you and your providers that are providing some of that overlap?
So I've seen that happen many, many different ways. There's only so much that we can kind of like push out to everybody else to become part of our process, but there is, you know, kind of a meshing that happens, kind of running up to being here and then leave and then going back to what somebody's doing. I think that's the ideal thing. And if there's as much information that can be given from current providers to our providers, and then we do what we do, and then we pass back off to those providers. That's the ideal that I look for. Sometimes people just say, nope, I got all my own things going on. I don't want anything other than the sympathetic and cellular pieces of the equation. I say, okay, it's your body, it's your life. I'm not going to require you to see all the other providers. I think people give up a lot in that scenario because of this. Actually, at least two reasons. Number one, I didn't know this until about a year and a half ago, but when people come and they meet different providers, there's, just like anybody else in your life, there's going to be a different degree of integrate, kind of opening that you have with a person based on their personality and their background and their energetics and their resonance. And when you have that happen with a person, that person opens you up. You feel the comfort and the hope that you have with that person because of some magical connection that you have with them. I never assume that's going to be me necessarily. When it is, that's really fun because that person really pours into our relationship together, and that's always enjoyable. But I like the odds of 10 of us being here, having a much greater possibility of helping that person engage and open, because placebo effect goes from, whatever, 2 to 10 or something like that. When that person is open and vulnerably engaging the process. So that's one of the reasons why. The other reason is to have a synergistic, collaborative group of people working from this many directions all at the same time. I don't see that anywhere else. The people who come here oftentimes ask me, how in the heck did you get all these people together to work? Because they're all truly gifted enough that they could just do their own careers throughout their entire life. They're working together with us as a group because that's the next step in their evolution of being able to serve humanity is they've now done their own thing, and doing it as part of a larger group is the kind of results that they couldn't otherwise get. So they're excited to be doing this. And that kind of collaboration, I just have never seen anywhere else before. And the patient, one of the patients actually named this for me. She named it Minnesota Envy. That being kind of poured on from so many different directions and elevated from so many directions at the same time feels really amazing. Be seen, known, encouraged from so many directions. It's a really hard experience to have in any other scenario. And you pretty much feel it right when you're walking in the door. So basically, that's a long way of saying we'll work with anybody the way that they want to. I don't want to restrict the skills that I have in doing guided cellular injections from only being used with our group. I just think a lot of things are given up if you don't do that. But we want to pass that back off to as many people as we can. More individual. Here's an important point. I nor anybody else that I work with, none of these providers believe that we own knowledge. I don't care if I was the first one that was inspired with something. I will share that with anybody. So I have a much harder time actually finding physicians that want to do a much more integrated kind of model like this. So if there's one that's interested out there, I'd be happy to help them set up another site doing high level, very, very integrative care. That answer your question?
It did. Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Beta, I think you're starting to ask something. You must unmute yourself.
Got it. No, I just, first of all, I want to say thank you for this webinar and appreciate your your holistic outlook in health, mind, body, spirit. This is amazing. The only question I have is, you had mentioned you cannot heal if you are on fight and flight. So if that sympathetic nervous system is on fire, you really cannot heal. So my question to you is, if you get a patient and wants to just come in and sign up for just the injection and not this full spectrum healing process, you already mentioned it, that they will probably feel better. And then the iceberg, the top, it will pop right back up. How do you approach that? How do you communicate this to a patient? How do you let them understand this to a point where they don't get mad? Because this is a challenge that I've been having in my profession.
Yes, and thank you for the compliment. That's a big compliment coming from a Chinese medicine physician. I think a lot more like you guys do than I do allopathic docs. So way back when I started doing PRP in 2007, I wanted to use it very vigilantly, very carefully. And when people would come in and say, I want that PRP for my tennis elbow, I'd say, okay, let's do some physical therapy and some chiropractic, and let's do some massage, and let's see if you still need the PRP. What I found was about half of those people had come in, their placebo effect was wrapped around the PRP. And if I tried to stop them and slow them down in their process to try to be a little more careful, they just went to one of the other half dozen people in the country that had started doing PRP, just at the same time or just before I did. And then I said to myself, all right, it's not my job to judge somebody's goals or their approaches. If they've really identified that this is their next best piece of the equation, that is their next best piece of the equation. Me trying to encourage them to see that it might be something else is counterproductive for both me and them. I'll put the whole program out there, and not uncommonly people will say, okay, yep, I really, really, really identify with this and this and this, but I'll do all this other stuff just because you telling me I should. And more often than not, they're going to still get benefit out of it if they still do the full spectrum process, and sometimes at great surprise to them. But if some of them come in and say, nope, I don't want to do any of the other stuff, be quiet with all that Charlie Brown teacher, blah, 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 and just do the injections on me, I can say with absolutely no humility that, yes, I've done this longer than almost anybody, and I can have more approaches to doing this than almost anybody. They're going to get higher quality regenerative injections from me than they are going to almost anywhere. And that's very non-Minnesotan of me to say, but it's true. And if I can be a piece of their process, and then involve them in as much of the other things as I can, there's a better chance that they're going to now have 2 or 3 other times that's going to happen in their life where they go, oh, that's what that Hanson guy was talking about when he was doing his blah blah. Now I get it. I had a conversation with somebody this morning where that was the situation. He said, yep, 3 months ago I would have never ever been able to digest what you were saying, but this is all exactly what I've been looking for. What was more fun actually is he's a local guy. That's uncommon for me. Usually it's somebody from far away who's been trying things for years and stumbles on me somehow and says, wow, you exist. I go, yes, I do. So put it out there. People will take in whatever's meaningful for them at the time. And I'm not going to look at them differently or treat them any differently if they only want to do regenerative injections with me. I shouldn't say only. It's still a big step to do regenerative injections with me. Because like everything else, I do them highly integrated and very, very complexly regionally done.
Correct.
How about you, Biddy? Have you gotten any pearls on that particular question yourself?
I think what you said was very respectful and honoring of both sides. And it goes to what your hierarchy of timing. I guess wherever you are, it's exactly where you need to be. And it's a place of, as a doctor, the passion I have, and I can see the big picture. And sometimes I could be a little bit too harsh or intrusive. I understand. So I'm learning to surrender that process and see where it goes. So you have more experience than I do. So I was curious how you navigate that.
Can I plug my own book?
Pardon?
Can I plug my own book?
Yes, of course.
I'm going to be one of those guys. Yes, in chapter 42, you're going, no. The most fun section for me to write was what I called the humbleness section. And perhaps the most dangerous thing that a medical provider can have going on inside of them is the need for their sense of self-esteem to be tied up in what's happening with the patient. True medical humbleness requires that we are actualized in and of ourselves, that we are acting from a neutral standpoint, offering what we can do for another human being to meaningfully progress in their journey. And if we get caught up in, well, the allopathic model, the osteopathic model, the chiropractic model, the physical therapy model, the Chinese medicine model, you know what? They're all just structure, and they all have positive things about them. Or for ourselves, if we've got deep traumas that we're supplanting deep personal work for feeling good about the fact that, I absolutely nailed that eye surgery and I'm the best ophthalmologist in the world. There's a problem there. And anything other than purely serving another human being for their greatest good ends up being a big stumbling block for every human being who's here to serve others. So that's my plug of the book.
I love that. Can't wait to read your book. I ordered it on Amazon.
Thank you. That is a compliment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Dr. Dennis, you and I have been working together for what, 8 years now? I'll tell everyone that there are a few people for whom I have greater respect than Dr. Dennis. And is he still with us? Oh, he must have had to go see a patient.
Dr. Hanson, I've got a couple questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for this webinar, and you and I have talked on the phone a couple of times, and I just want to thank you for your encouragement and support.
My pleasure.
It's helpful when you're out here on your own sometimes trying to figure this stuff out, but great information. One thing that caught my attention was towards the end of your presentation, I think you mentioned neuroplasticity.
Yes.
And I was just curious if you have any experience or your patients have tried DNRS as a modality, if you have any opinions on that.
I have had patients do that. Dr. Emmett Bishop is a PhD psychologist, and she does EMDR. So that's another way to get their brain tap, brain spotting, brain mapping, all different ways of trying to loosen up all those tangled pathways that we automatically go through in our decision-making, thought and feeling, emotional processes. So it's out there, it's a tool.
Because that sort of resonated with me with the overall approach that we all have the ability to heal ourselves. And when I learned about DNRS, I'm like, okay, well that's in alignment with that concept.
Yep, absolutely. Any structure, thought process, any interventions that end up leading you back to you, to become a more actualized, independent human being, able to work forward into your own goals, I'm all for. I'd like to say that I can get every single possibility and process under one roof, but can't do it.
And then another question is regarding fight or flight. And I feel like I should know this, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Is there a way to determine if I'm in fight or flight or not? I'm pretty sure I am, based on everything I've got going on.
Yeah, you know what? There are ways to measure that. There are different testings. Dr. Nash does that. He's got a gizmo for everything. So he's got different testing modules for all that kind of stuff. And there are questionnaires and there are PTSD questionnaires. And I just assume everybody's in some degree of fight or flight. What, even if it's the most placid person, you know, living in a cave somewhere that has food that automatically falls down in their lap every day and they're listening to the best music that they've ever known. There's something inside of all of us that's, you know, kind of cankered and challenged and abscessed, and it's in the deep, dark, cobwebby corners, or it's what we're working on right at this moment. And that hyper sympathetic state that we're all in, very, very difficult to be the greatest version of ourselves. Unless you're unless you're levitating, you know, in a cave and you've overcome all 3-dimensional rules and everything. I don't know. You might not, that person might not have any fight or flight problems, but I think all the rest of us mere mortals do. So initiating actually the very first, and oftentimes the first 2 procedures that I do are meant to do just that, just dial back all of the fight or flight nervous system abnormalities and a lot of the chemical abnormalities that I can. And that's subject for another day, I suppose, the way I arrange all the different procedures based on our assessments and these 4 stages of intervention that we do. That's subject for a different day. That's only been around for 6 months. So I've kind of taken a little bit of time to let this stuff sort of cure and kind of come together before I was starting to let everybody know, okay, this is the most advanced form of human healing that I've been able to bring together in my whole career so far. But I've never stopped, actually. The fluoroquinolone thing, Chris, is the most complex condition on the face of the planet. And because it has so many different things that it can affect and variably affect and interrelatedly affect with each other and everything else that's gone on previously. It's a heck of an entangled challenge. I once had 2 psychiatrists, no psychologists, PhD psychologists on the line with me once, and I asked them, so what is the diagnosis for a human being who's drawn to the most complex medical condition on the planet to want to work on that? And I don't know. One of them said, I don't know, you're crazy. And the other one, I think, said, I don't remember what she said, but basically nobody really wants to do this. And my desire to is just, that's what I was born. That's what the rock I was cut from. Nothing great about it, just the way that I was cut. And try not to, I'm going to mention it again. I know this is a hard one. Try to consider your process of reformation, refinement, clarification, the coming forward of true self. Try to consider that to be a joyful process. And joy can be a choice, but it, you know, more often is a whole bunch of different processes that we're putting in alignment together with each other to allow to happen. And because people heal the best when they're in a state of joy.
Yeah.
Who else wants to throw out hopes, dreams, thoughts, feelings? Or questions? There's a painting on our wall that had a unknown artist that did the, or poet who did the quote, but it says, everything is conspiring for your greatest benefit. Acquire the habit of believing that, and your life will be nothing short of amazing. I.e., nothing bad happens other than what we choose to assign badness to. We choose the degree of badness or goodness that we're experiencing at any moment in our life. That's kind of annoying, actually, when you think about it. When you come to that realization, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't have to have all that crap happen. Even that was meaningful, though. I mean, you got to feel and understand contrast and texture in your life. And I think that's meaningful no matter if it needed to happen or not needed to happen. It did, so enjoy it. All right, I can close it down if nobody else has any other questions at the moment. Oh, wait a minute, I got some typed ones. Seizures related to Cipro. Well, I had a seizure condition for 20 years, so I wouldn't say that it's related to Cipro. Cipro might have been the last thing that sort of pushed it over the edge, but it's not the only thing. So there's lots of ways to deal with seizures that are non-pharmacologic. I could probably talk for days on that subject because I experienced it for 20 years. Happy to have that chat with you. Those 6 levels of the neurologic system, all of them are going to affect, plus emotional and deep quantum are all going to affect a process as big as a seizure. And I don't ever assume that I'm going to go into a process and say, all right, yep, here is the formula for this person. It's going to be 2 of this and 6 of this and 8 of this and 12 of this all mixed together for 10 minutes. And then you put this and this and this together for 10 days. And I don't know what that's going to happen. I know I can start in all of the processes, the deepest processes, and help them move forward. How it's going to emerge from there, I really have no idea. I just know that it's going to likely have a positive effect on people in ways that I can't predict. And sometimes when you get into those deep subconscious challenges, and sometimes when you get into the secondary gain issues and everything gets entangled, well, then it's not going to be an overtly enjoyable process. But now that I'm telling people this ahead of time, hey, this might happen. And I am not your enemy. I'm not the bad guy who did something to you. I just helped you start a process, and what you do with that process down the road is up to you. Long ago, I decided it's not my job to heal anybody. It's just to help you heal yourself. Yes. Got a question on flux patients that have systemic autoimmune disease. Absolutely not an uncommon thing. It can be, 1 or 2 different things, and it can be dozens of different things. We've had people that we took all the way down with dietitian and naturopath down to like 2 or 3 things that they could eat for weeks to get their immune system to calm down as much as possible. I'm going to, for those of you that stuck around this long, I'm going to tell you that we are site 0 nationally for a new supplement that has effects on collagen, the immune system, and the gut that so far are having extremely positive effects on even my most difficult fluoroquinolone toxicity patients. So that'll be studied in CCI, craniocervical instability, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, fluoroquinolone toxicity, probably the general population. There's probably going to be about 5 or 6 studies that we'll do with that supplement. One of my patients was the discoverer of it. So we'll be doing that work together, and that'll be part of what I do with probably all my fluoroquinolone patients going forward. Okay. Anybody have any questions, typed or verbal?
The supplement that you just brought up, how about being used for preventative?
Because I like the way that it was bundled by the company that my patient went to. It was bundled with enzymes and probiotics, so that you're hitting a lot of positive things all at the same time. And there's a topical version of it that appears to have really significantly positive effects. I use it.
Mhm.
I use all my supplements 3 days a week so that my immune system doesn't get irritated with them being there every day. But that's coming. I've only had those people on, the fluoroquinolone people. I've only had them on it for a couple of weeks. One of them having unbelievable results with it, and one of them it's so sensitive to so many different things, couldn't take it. And then a few in between that are starting to get slow progress. These are some of my most challenging patients that I've worked on over the years that took up the option to be able to try a new supplement. I just put that in the physiologic category and say, okay, that's a piece of the equation in 12 pieces of the equation, and let's see what it does. That's one of my encouraging things to our fluoroquinolone population. There's so many complex things happening all at the same time. Try not to think, well, I need this form of magnesium, or I need my mitochondria improved, or I need all these things. They can't be, you can't take one thread out of a big, massive knot and say, that's going to fix the whole thing. It doesn't. It may make you less or asymptomatic, but it doesn't heal a person. Looking at all the different processes from all those 12 different categories and working on them meaningfully forward, that is what is healing. That's what healing is. I kind of like my sign. I should
Dr. Hansen, is the supplement something that you'll be able to tell us about soon, or do you have to wait for a period of time for these studies, or do you have a gauge of how comfortable you are with that?
So that'll be coming. I want to have at least a couple of months where I've worked with people, and the formulation, I just met with the formulator and the owner of the supplement, and week and a half ago, and we're still working out, what should we have in there for ABC and XYZ, what's going to synergize, what might be negative, because there has to be binders and there has to be preservatives and things like that. So we're trying to look into that from the basic science standpoint all the way up through the clinical research standpoint. The first official trial is going to be Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm hoping that gets going by June or July. And the topical is not available. The oral is available. But again, I'd like to at least have another couple of months before I start telling people, yes, this is really a good thing, go do it. But keep in touch.
Is it something that's already there and you're formulating something different, or you're just going to promote it? Like,
there have been fungus and yeast derived versions of this molecule. This is a bacterial derived one, and it's water soluble. None of the other ones are water soluble. So it can directly incorporate into collagen, stimulates fibroblasts. There are actually receptors throughout the body for this molecule, and it calms the immune system. Then I have a couple of other things that I believe it's probably doing. So that's all the way down to the basic science level, how I'm working with the community. So basic science, quantum, macrostructural, deep emotion. Somehow I mix it all together, and it doesn't seem like a too crazy, chaotic set of things to do. But it's coming. Be patient and be hopeful. There's that first do no harm thing where I want to make sure, is this really well tolerated, and are people happy with the results and that kind of thing. I'm glad that it's already available. The molecule itself has generally recognized GRAS, generally recognized as safe by the FDA. So getting it through an IRB is going to be pretty easy, I think. That's a hard indication to get from the FDA, by the way. So it's just a new molecule with a different shape to it at the atomic level.
Okay.
That seems to work a little better with humans than the fungus and yeast ones. So
Well, good luck. Yeah.
be happy, be hopeful. Yeah, it's going to do well. I have a pretty strong intuitive sense about this one's positive effects. All right. Anybody else? All right.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome, you
for
guys.
your time.
Remember, healing is possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for always wanting to keep learning and improving, and thank you.
Thanks.
Much, appreciate it.
Thank you
I
very much.
have no problem telling everybody the fluoroclinolone community is what created me as a physician. Again, I was just odd enough to want to do that. But what's nice about actually what happens with you guys and EDS and CCI, they're the most complex thing that really nobody else really wants to deal with because it's so complex. What I do with you guys trickles down into the rest of the population in positive ways. So you guys are essentially creating the possibilities for wider and broader and more effective healing for everybody else.
Makes sense.
All right, you guys,
Thank you.
I'm available and I'll be doing these kind of regularly now. I used to do these all the time, but I had to go through this big reformation myself before I was coming back out with new ways of doing this for everyone. But all you guys, best and blessings, be well.
All right, thank you, sir.
Take care.